let's just talk about Steampunk Valentine. With Valentine's Day tomorrow, I just wanted to share this. And like I said, this doesn't have to be for Valentine's Day. Here's what I love about Valentine's Day more than anything as a maker, right? And that is hearts, right? I have definitely a very special bond with hearts now, and even heart as an icon. And so Valentine's Day is the best time to find so many heart-related things at the craft store, right? Or the craft store or the dollar store, really anyone. It's just about finding that shape, and that shape is something that you can use all year long. And so the whole idea behind this project, and I've shared how to create a heart, but we're going to do it from start to finish. But I love this little steampunk heart box. And what I did is I actually created it where it does light up. You see that? Little tiny lights in the back. And so we can create just this wonderful little, it could be something for your creative space. It could be for the one you love, or it could just be the fact that, well, you love yourself and you want to just make this for you. And so that little word band, know in your heart you are loved. It does have a little steampunk vibe. I do love all the look of this with that arrow, that stitched on embellishment, very cool steampunk look, and using a vignette. And like I said, we're going to do start to finish on this. So, well, let's go. I agree. It must light up. Listen, I love tiny lights. Like, tiny lights are everything. And for me, especially as the designer, to have these in the line, if we don't use tiny lights all the time, tiny lights will become a seasonal product and we'll only get them once a year, and I don't want that. So I love the fact that we have tiny lights in the everyday line, and so that's why I love to use them. So this is what we're going to create. Just going to kind of sit there, just light up, and I'll go through all the details, how we do it from start to finish. Now, the thing about these demos, and I want to also preface this, this is not kind of the normal Saturday format. Like, I'm not doing a normal make from start to finish. I know many of us message saying, you know, do you have a supply list so we can make along? And that sounds like a great idea. It's just not something that I do, because I don't think like that. This just happened to work into a project, but usually it's tutorial based. But the whole idea behind this, again, is sharing some techniques or process along the way. And I'll talk about each supply as we get to it, and I'll bring this make in and talk about each detail as it's important. Now, when it comes to making, obviously, you get to decide as the maker what really works for you and what substrates you want to work on. So I want you to remember that as I go through this, this is what I'm using. But if you have different things at home, use what you have, right? Or if you need to go on a shopping spree because, well, tomorrow's Valentine's Day and you want to treat yourself to a little creative love, go for it. So what I'm using as my surface, I'm using a vignette box. One of my favorite things in the Ideology line, these are wooden boxes that are hand charred. They're actually burned. So this does not have a wood stain on it. It actually is torched, and that's what gives it the color. And the nice thing about that is that it still allows me to go and paint over it, ink over it, do different things to it without worrying about a color underneath or a stain. I love the chart effect because it definitely brings out the wood vibe. Now, even though I'm going to collage it, the inside I like to leave as wood because, well, I'm using a wooden box and I want to remember that it's a wooden box. So that's just my personal preference. So I'll collage the outside. Now, these are part of the everyday line. We have vignettes in shrines and trays and all sorts of different shapes, but it's a great substrate because not only is it sturdy, but you can see in the boxes you get 4 different sizes. Now, these are vignette frames, and sadly, this is retiring this year. It is going away this year. So it's still available this year, but if you like them, you better stock up because they are going to be gone for good. Again, one of those products that if it doesn't sell, it just doesn't last forever. Here's what I loved about these. These are actually made out of wood, kind of that thin trim you could find, usually done for doll houses and all that. But I love the fact that these frames are an unfinished wood, but already sized for the vignette boxes. So you get 4 frames and they will fit all the boxes. And the other cool thing is you don't have to use them with a box. You can use this frame over anything, over a piece of chipboard or over a canvas that you have, anything like that. I just think that this is really one of those great products, and well, I've stocked up, so I'm not super worried about it. But I recommend that you guys, if you want, that you're gonna wanna stock up. So I have all of my trinkety bits already set out for this project, and I'll talk about each one as we do it. So we don't need to kind of get ahead of ourselves. We're going to start with these. And usually when it comes to wet things where I need to wait for glue to dry or paint to dry, it's a good idea to do those first, set them aside so you can work on the other fussy bits that you want to do, all right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to collage this. We're going to collage the outside and that little inside back. And you can do this with many things. You can take up scraps of maybe backgrounds that you've done, or you can do any of your ephemera. But if you have any paper pads, you can work with those as well. Now, the paper pads, I've done paper pads in 12 by 12. I've also done these in 8 by 8s, and these are fun for me when I'm doing smaller projects, because I can take these pads of paper and they already have a lot from all different collections, right? This one is etc. And so the cool thing about this is you can see they're all different. So it's not a specific theme. And some of them are already collage, right? You'll see stuff from Wallflower. This is stuff from Memoranda. And I like taking these pieces of paper because it saves me a step in collaging, right? I like the fact that we can take this and cut it up. So that's what I've done. I've taken out a sheet of paper, I've gone in and made my measurements, and I've done the collage. And I'm not one to post measurements. I'm not one to cut paper live, because if you have a paper cutter, you can cut your own paper. And the other thing is that vignette boxes are handmade. Each one is handmade. So you might have the perfect measurement, but you still have to cut to the nearest ish to make sure it fits. And so what I've done is I've taken a single sheet of 8 by 8 and I've cut my pieces out of one sheet to work in my box. So I've got a piece that's going to fit into the background. I've got a piece that's going to go along the back, and I've got my side pieces for the outer edge. Again, you can work with as many pieces that you're going to want to work with, okay? Now, before I glue this, because I'm going to collage, I'm also going to work on my frame. And my frame, I want to change from wood into kind of a vintage metallic frame. And I'm going to share a little trick when it comes to making this a little bit more grunged and vintage. So I'm going to paint this first. Now, when it comes to painting, I like to work on my media mat because I've got the glass, and then I have this non-stick craft mat that is there. And that's really why I developed this surface to begin with, because this craft mat is non-stick. So I can do all of my messy stuff here, paint and glue and wipe it off, and I can save this area for assembling. So for painting, again, if you wanted to, you could use a lot of different things. You could go in and, take some wax paper or whatever. The other thing that's really important is if you're going to create something and you already know the elements you're going to use, just pull those supplies out. It's totally up to you though. It's your call what you want to do. But I'm going to just work with a little bit of distress paint. This is brushed pewter. It's metallic. You can do a lot of different things when it comes to painting this. You can use foil on it. You can use alcohol ink alloys or mixatives. You can do anything, or if you don't want it metallic, paint it whatever you want, right? But I'm just going to use this metallic paint. Take a paintbrush. Going to use this as my paint palette. So I'm just going to flip this lid open, squeeze out a little bit of paint, close it up, and we're just going to go in and paint. And when it comes to painting this, I'm going to go for a vintage frame. So that's why when I'm painting, I'm going to be pretty quick about this. I just use a little flat brush. I want something that's not too massive, right? You could have a giant foam brush, but I think that you usually end up using way too much medium if you do that. But again, whatever's going to work for you. And I'm just doing the sides. And you'll notice that when I'm painting, I'm using this craft mat as kind of my painting surface. I'm not holding this up in the air, because this is going to allow me to paint right along the outside edge, the inside edge, and just go right along that raw wood. I'll flip this around. It's the same thing. I always just feel like when you're making, you know what's comfortable for you as a maker, right? So this, because I'm right-handed, this is obviously the easiest, most comfortable way to paint, but some people like try to, turn their hand all around, whatever works. But utilize your tools in that way. The whole idea behind certain tools and the way they're developed is really for you in mind. And the cool thing about the media mat, it does come in a right hand and left hand version. And some people, it's interesting because even lefties, I read a lot of them, you still prefer kind of the right mat. So it just depends on what side you want this area to be. All right. So you can see I'm just going around painting it, and I'm using up that paint, right? You'll notice that as the distress paint soaks into that raw wood, and that's why we're giving it a nice base coat, we can go and fill in the blanks a little bit. Because there's no point in wasting the paint. If it's there, why not make sure that everything is covered? But it doesn't have to go on kind of blobby, right? Now I'm going to look at the outside edges because I haven't seen those. So see, there's a little corner there. And this is the only time that I'll pick this up, just to hit those areas that I can't visually see. See, there's another little corner. But for the most part, it's done. It just allows me to go in and just do a little touch up with the paint that's there. See, there you go. That bottom edge, I didn't really catch that much at all. And I'll just use that. Now, distress paint is a permanent paint. So once this is dry, totally waterproof, right? Perfect. So this one, I'm just going to throw in the water. Okay, just threw my brush in water, and there is my frame. Now that I'm done painting, I'm going to clean the paint off of the mat. That's the other thing. If you clean as you go, it's just a dry paper towel. If you clean as you go, you don't have to work in muck. That's the other thing. People say, oh, how does your stuff stay so clean? Well, here's an idea. I clean it, right? I just clean it as I go. And it's just dry paper towel, because if you add water to this, right? If you know anything about distress paint, I've done some demos. This is a water reactive paint. So if I sprayed water on my paint, I'm just going to make more paint. And that's what's nice about this. Think of it as like a creative dry erase board. If you just take that, you can wipe off glue and paint and everything from that mat. Okay, so there's my frame. That's done. Now we're going to go in and glue, and I'm going to do all my gluing with Distress Collage Medium. It is a matte. And the reason I like to use Distress Collage Medium, it has a very quick drying time. So that is nice. It also has a great matte finish. If you didn't want to use matte, there is a tinted one called Vintage. That's really nice to give everything a cohesive vintage look. And there's also one called Crazing that provides little tiny crackly lines. I only use Crazing specifically if I'm going to notice those crazes, because they're very subtle. So on something like this, I'm not going to notice it that much. All right, so here's how I'm going to do the box. Again, you can do it in whatever order works for you, but this is how I do it. My gluing is going to take place here. My paper's here, and I have a dry paper towel, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to start with the back of the box. Now I'm going to use a collage brush for glue. Again, could you use a paintbrush? Yes. But these brushes, you can see that they're hollow on the inside. They come in 3 different sizes. These are designed for glue. It's a nice, flexible, yet very stiff brush. So it's perfect for applying adhesive and pressing it down and just getting glue where I want it to be. So whenever I'm gluing, I always use these. Plus, as you can see, they just kind of get a little trashed, and that's okay. I like that because it's specifically for glue. I'm just going to use this little guy because he's going to be like the perfect size for this whole box. But again, you can use different size brushes for whatever it is you're going to work on. Now, the whole idea with using Collage Medium has pretty much the drying time of now. It dries very, very quick. So if you're a gluer and you're doing this, right? Look at the color of the box. You see how you can pretty much see the color of the box? Well, chances are that glue is already starting to dry. So when I use Collage Medium, I want to be pretty generous, meaning I want to be able to see kind of that milky haze. I don't want it to be like frosting, right? I don't want it to be white like icing a cake. You don't want to put it on with a palette knife. But that's the other great thing about the brush. It allows me, you can see that I can use the brush on its side to get that nice milky layer. If I have too much glue, I can stand it up and actually scrape that off. See that area that has no glue? So that's really why I like to use these brushes for glue. So I'm just going to spread that on, lay it down on my mat, take my piece of paper, place it down. Okay, then I'm going to take a paper towel, just a dry paper towel, and now I'm going to start to burnish this piece of paper. And while I'm doing that, I'm holding on to it in one spot. Okay, and the reason I'm burnishing this is, 1, I want to get any air bubbles that might come out. 2, any glue that's oozing out of the side is just going to get wiped up with this paper towel. Now I am going to do a top coat of glue, but I always like to do kind of a base coat first before I do the top coat. Then I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to form this paper to the box, right? The reason I want to do that is, again, this is a handmade box, so it might have a little lip. See, that's a little higher, and now I can just press that down. Now, Collage Medium, depending on what you put it on, that, of course, is going to determine its drying time. So when I say drying time of now, that's really a paper-to-paper aspect, but drying time like on here, I can't move this. I can't shift this. If I went to peel it off, it would rip half the paper. So that's really why I wanted to do Collage Medium. It doesn't have a lot of moisture like some gel mediums. It doesn't dry with any shine like a Mod Podge will. It's not sticky. So that's really why I did it. It's my favorite glue for collage and assemblage work. All right. So now that I've done the back, I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to work on the inside. And usually when I glue, I try to do opposite sides, because now when I'm working, the part I just glued has some pressure on it. You see what I mean? Like, it's got the box sitting on top of it. So that's just how I work. Again, you can do you, but make sure that when you put this down, you know which way your art is going, so you don't glue something upside down. And I'm just going to do the same thing. Just take the brush. Now, because Collage Medium dries totally matte, you don't have to worry about getting glue on the edges in there. No one's going to see it. Not even you. It's going to dry completely invisible and matte, but I'm going for kind of that milky film. And you'll see that when I'm doing this, I'm applying a couple of layers because, well, wood is porous. So if you just do one thin layer, chances are that glue is going to dry before you have a chance to get anything in there. So I'm going to place my paper down. Again, I take the paper towel. Now, why the paper towel? Well, the paper towel just moves. The paper towel moves easier than my fingers will initially. So that's why I just use a dry paper towel. Could you use a bone folder or something else? Of course. But you can see that that dry paper towel just really allows me to kind of smooth it out, get rid of any air bubbles that are in there, and then I'll go with my fingers and just make sure that I can get into the corners. And you can feel it. You know, by using your fingers, you can also feel if you have any corners coming up or any bubbles that you need to work on. But there you go. It's that simple. Now we're just going to move on to the sides. Same thing. So we've got our pieces of paper, too long, too short. So again, going to the collage medium, and you can see I'm just holding on to the box. Just put my layer of glue down, kind of get, again, you're looking for like that milky finish. And the nice thing, don't go scraping off your glue. You're going to use it. So just lay it down on the mat, place this down. I don't worry about corners and edges, and you'll see why in a bit. But that's why I say you cut to the nearest ish. So if you have little areas that are exposed, bonus. You'll see why. Again, just using that paper towel. And now I'm going to go with my fingers. And again, just press that down. You want to press that because you always want to form your paper to whatever surface. Right? Pretty simple. All right. There you go. A little tap, tap. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the nice comments. Just moving right along. Okay. Now I'm going to flip this. See, now I can use this side, and while I'm doing that, that's applying pressure to the side I just glued. So it's not foolproof because sometimes you don't have that luxury, but in this case I am. So there we go, I'm using the glue. So see how that brush just really allows total control with glue application. If I just lightly drag over the top, I get that glue. Oop, too much, I can scrape that off. See, so nice. It's because of that hollow inside of the brush. But I want to have that milky, creamy look. I don't need all of my glue lines to run parallel, so you don't have to worry about that either. Some people do that. I don't. Same thing, paper, and always hold one side when you're doing this, because if you're burnishing this back and forth, you don't want your paper to slide, because once it does, collage medium just dries very quick. It's going to be really challenging to move that. So now, same thing, just going to add pressure, just using my fingers, and you can just tell, you'll feel it. That's all. And also by doing that wipe initially, you are getting a lot of the excess glue off. So I will eventually get some glue on my fingers, I'll show you. But at least by using the paper towel first, I don't have sticky fingers when I'm doing this. Because if you try this with sticky fingers, then as you're pressing, you're pretty much going to be ripping the paper off at the same time, right? We don't really want to do that. Okay, now I've got two more papers. Now, all the paper is double-sided, so you can pick what you want, but this is just background stuff. So same thing, collage medium, place this down right over the top. There we go. Push that, and now take my fingers and press this down. And if you ever miss a spot, no big deal, right? So see how like this one, watch, see how that wants to lift off? If that wants to lift off, just go in and add more glue. It's not a problem. And I'll tell you why that's lifting off. I'll show you in just a second. It's because the top of this box, here, let me get this set first. The top of this box has, see how the wood is a little higher? That's okay. The paper can form. So this one's just going to need a little bit more attention to get that to want to set where it's going to set. But it will be totally fine. Collage medium, believe it or not, will glue anything you want to glue. It will glue metal and glass and plastic and fabric. And paper and wood. So see those little bumps? But that paper's just formed there. So now we'll just flip that over. A little bit more collage medium. And I'll put this on the bottom. So the gluing part, this is the part that I always find super interesting of how much time people spend gluing. You really don't need to spend a lot of time gluing. You just need to use enough glue and enough pressure to get the stuff down there. But I love the look of distress, and so I'll show you some different ways that we can distress. And when we are distressing, the other thing to keep in mind is that you don't always have to go brown, right? You might like distress to be shabby chic. You might want it to be pink. You might want to have some green tones or some blue. That's the other thing that I mentioned. Remember that what you're kind of learning is just a technique. So here was just about gluing paper. So now you know that if you're going to cover, this is a vignette box, but if you were going to do a paper mache box or a canvas or an art journal, just some tricks on collage medium about spreading it out, putting it down and placing it. And notice that when I glue, I'm always gluing to the substrate, not the paper, right? I'm never taking that strip of paper and applying glue to it first, because the paper is going to want to curl right away. So I always apply glue to my substrate, the surface first, and then apply whatever I'm going to put over the top of it. So I'm not done gluing yet, so that's why I've got my brush open, but you can see that the paper is glued, right? So I'm going to give this just a second to dry. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go back to my frame because my paint is already dry, and I'm going to coat this with a layer of collage medium. And the reason I want to put some collage medium on here is collage medium, in addition to its wonderful adhesive properties, is also a great sealer. Okay, collage medium is waterproof. So by putting this on, it's going to seal that wooden frame, and it's going to allow me to distress it with crayons later and provide a nice slick surface. Okay, so same thing, just flipping that around. And I'm not super concerned about coverage as long as I know that I'm using enough of the stuff. So I'll pick up all that glue from the mat, and just same thing. You can't really see it because it's clear. So as long as I've gone over those areas a few times, it's going to be fine. There we are. Now, because this has wet collage medium on the frame, I'm just going to set it over here. I don't want to set it on the glass because if I do, I'll get collage medium here. Now, if you get collage medium or gesso or gel medium or something on your glass that you don't want, super easy to clean up. You can use hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer will remove dried glue, glossy accent, paint, anything from your mat. But you can also use a razor blade. This is tempered glass, so you can do that. But hand sanitizer is the easiest thing to remove any dried gunk from the glass surface. So now we're going to go back to this. So for this one, we have to use our fingers. And so for people that say, well, what if I don't want to use my fingers on the glue? My advice is to get over yourself. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean that in a way as you're a maker, we're making. And if you have like tactile issues like I do, I don't like glue on my fingers. I don't like when I can't feel my fingertips. So I just have a baby wipe because collage medium is water-based, which means it will clean off with water while it's wet. Once it's dry, however, as I mentioned, it's waterproof. So if you don't have anything to clean your hands regularly, collage medium will dry on your fingers and you'll be picking it off for the rest of the day. And maybe some people like that too. So the reason I say use your fingers is there's no better way to make sure that we have the collage medium moved around than with your fingers, really. So what I'm going to do is you can use a brush or you can just go in with your fingers. It's totally up to you what you want to do. I'm still going to work with my brush because I have collage medium on it. And I'm just going to use it to apply some just inside there. You can see it's just in there. And now I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to move this around. I learned this trick from Paula Cini. She uses her fingers a lot for collage medium because I was like, how do you not get brush strokes in the glue? And she's like, I just use my fingers. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, no, you just kind of have to get in there and just move that around. But what you're also going to notice is that by doing this, you're really providing a nice seal over the top of it. You can feel if you have too much, and it works itself into the paper almost instantly. Like its drying time is really, really quick. But after that, I'm just going to go in and wipe off my fingers. Now I'm ready to go to the next one. And so this is just about, again, just putting some on there. You can see I'm not using a lot. That's why I'm showing you. And I didn't paint edge to edge either because I can use what's here to kind of massage it out. If you need more, you can add more. But what this is doing is I'm also bringing this out to those edges, those corners, and just really making sure that I have nice coverage, but it's smoothing out that collage medium. And you'll feel the collage medium start to get tacky, and that's when you need to stop. Stop massaging the glue if it's getting tacky because it's drying, right? So if you just keep going, then that's just going to start pilling up the glue. This is a great foundation if you want to add other things over the top of it, especially crayons, right? And because this is has a matte finish, you don't have to worry about any shine whatsoever. So that's really good. So once I do that side, now I'm not going to do the other side because I've got wet collage medium. So I'm not going to do that same trick that I did with glue. Instead, I'm just going to work around that box, giving that a chance to dry each time. But because I'm working on a non-stick mat, That's okay if the glue is still wet. The collage medium is still wet on the other side, but because I've rubbed most of it in and we're on a non-stick mat, I don't have to worry about anything sticking. And that's really why I prefer this versus, you know, some people use like deli paper or wax paper for gluing. That's okay, but it's still not truly non-stick, and you could have your project end up getting stuck to the surface. So there we go. I've got collage medium all the way around. Because I've worked while the entire thing is wet, I'm able to just go in. Excellent. Clean off my hands, clean off my fingers. Now, if you were doing other projects, let's say you were going to do a lot of different projects, maybe you were going to do several pages in a journal or whatnot. If you have a collage brush and you plan on using it again that day, just take that and wrap it in a baby wipe. Okay, a baby wipe's going to be, or a wet paper towel or something damp, because that's going to be enough to keep the bristles moist, keep the glue from drying on the brush. But I don't like to put my brush in water if I'm going to use it again, because a wet brush is going to add moisture to this, and that's how you get bubbly paper when you're collaging. That's how you get things to kind of look like lasagna, right? It's too much moisture trapped under the paper. So that's what I do. So at this point, I've got both of these drying. Okay, now if you're working with this and let's say you wanted to go quick, you're like, hey Tim, I'm ready to rock and roll, I want to keep going. You can dry collage medium with a heat tool. It will not blister or bubble because we put it on thin, so you can go in and dry both of them. We're not going to because we're going to move on to something else, but you could, okay? So for both of these, I'm just going to move this out of here. See my glue that's here? I'm just going in with that same dry paper towel. And like I mentioned, it's like a dry erase board. You can see that glue just start rolling off. See, little glue boogies. Yep. And that will take those off of the craft mat. And you could do, like this one has glue on it. So I'll just use another paper towel just to get rid of all these little rolling collage mediums. Could you still use water on collage medium to clean it off the craft mat? Yes. Okay. So far, so good. Excellent. So next, while these are drying, we're going to move on to another part. And that's the other thing to keep in mind about making a project. If you have things that have a longer drying time, do those first, right? So let's say you're just going to kind of base your surface with collage and then you're going to worry about your trinkets. Well, that's what we're going to do next. So we've got the frame and the box drying, and now we're going to work on the heart. Now the heart, as I mentioned for Valentine's Day, so many cool hearts that you can get at the craft store now. This is a styrofoam heart. I picked these up, and by me, I mean Mario, picked these up at the craft store. They're styrofoam hearts. You can do paper mache hearts. You can even do plastic things, right? Because we're going to cover the substrate, it doesn't matter what this substrate is. So it could be the tackiest piece of plastic. It could be a container that held candy. It could be really anything in any shape. I'm just using this heart, and I found the styrofoam heart like the perfect shape, the perfect size. So it could be anything. So that's why I was saying, like, when you go to the dollar store, look at shape, not design. These happen to be plain and ready to finish, but they wouldn't have to be, right? They could be covered in whatever you want. But what we're going to cover them with is we're going to give it this industrial steampunk look that will ultimately result into this kind of panel. Okay, that's what we're going to end up with. So here's how we do it. We're going to work with a 3D embossing folder. Now, if you don't have a 3D embossing folder, use whatever embossing folder. If you don't want to use this one that has that kind of riveted patchwork look, maybe you're going to do a swirly one or botanical one, whatever. I love this one because it's designed to be cut apart. It also is designed to have all these little dents and really give it an industrial vibe. So I actually designed this folder with this technique in mind, because I used to have an original version, something similar, but it didn't have nearly the detail that we get with 3D. Now for our substrate, we're going to work with foil tape sheets. Now this is not cardstock. This is actually adhesive back aluminum. It is metal. Okay, it's thin metal, way thinner than a soda can. Some people refer to it as like flashing tape, like you can go to the hardware store and you can get flashing tape. What I like about this is actually thicker than flashing tape, so it holds a better shape. I used to use flashing tape way back when, because you could buy it, but I love the fact that I can get this size, it's 4 1/4, 5 1/2, or I can get this in 6 by 12. So it's nice if you're going to do picture frames or cigar boxes or whatever. And you can see that it is, well, it's reflective. It is metal. So I like its thickness and its size. That's why we did this, okay? Because I wanted something thicker than flashing tape. So here's a sheet of it. Now, when you get it, don't be concerned if it's got little pits or bumps, because it is very thin metal. So every time you handle it, or maybe you punch in with your fingernail or a ring, it's going to have little dents. Don't worry about it, especially if you're going to texture it. We're just going to take one sheet, and as I mentioned, it's adhesive back, and we're going to emboss it. So I'm going to place it into my 3D folder. And it's a little bit smaller than this because the 3D folder is bigger than a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. You can go wherever you want. I want that little, see that little panel right there? So I'm going to put mine more towards the top. I'm going to close this down, and then I will take my machine. It's going to be really close, but it's just easier for me to work here. You can use whatever machine you want to do your embossing. I'm going to be using the Vagabond while we can, before they're gone for good. Right, Mario? It's going to be a sad day when the Vagabonds are gone. All right. So we're going to emboss it 3 times, just following the direction. So there's 1 pass. I'm going to flip the switch. There's 2 passes. And here's our 3rd pass. I agree, Michelle. I love collage medium as well. It is. I could use thick aluminum foil. You can, but I'm not sure how you're going to stick that down. So ever tried to glue aluminum foil? Not so easy, but yeah, you do you. I just think that, I mean, you could use aluminum foil, but it's just going to be a lot more wrinkly, and it's not going to have the adhesive factor of this. But that's why I said, use what you have. So here we've got it embossed, and you can see by embossing it, it created its own little wrinkles. I call that bonus, okay? Again, don't worry about the wrinkles throughout all of this. Now, there's a couple of ways that we can turn this from a shiny surface into this cool industrial finish. One is using distressed paint. Back in the day, this was my jam. I used to do black paint, rub it over the metal, rub it off while it's wet, and you get this effect. Pretty cool. However, I found that the paint, it doesn't seem to have the same shine as this one. See how this one seems a little dull compared to this? So I found that by using alcohol ink, I actually keep my metal more shiny than dull. So we're going to do the alcohol ink version of this. All right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take pitch black, and it could be whatever color. I just want this to be black, so I'm using pitch black alcohol ink. There we go. It's going to focus. There we are. And we're going to apply it the same way we would apply alcohol ink. I'm just going to work with this, okay? So I'm just going to place that down with some felt. And here's what we're going to do. Now, when you work with alcohol ink on your media mat, do not use alcohol ink on this non-stick. That's the only medium you don't want to work on this craft mat. Alcohol ink, because it is a solvent ink, will stain this, right? So if I'm just going to kind of go crazy with alcohol inks one day, I actually peel this off and I don't even have this anywhere. But because I'm only doing this small part, it's going to be totally fine just working over here, knowing my craft mat is over there. So I'm just going to take my pitch black. I'm just going to apply some right to the felt, and I'm going to ink this up. And when you ink this up, you could stamp it if you want, but the idea is we really want to get a nice layer of black ink on there. So first thing I do is, you can see I'm just kind of rubbing this around. And then once I do that, now I'll go in, I'll just take whatever excess ink is on there and just kind of stamp it down here and there. As I mentioned, this is a nice heavier foil, so I don't have to worry about flattening out my image. Okay, and you'll know when the alcohol ink starts to dry because it gets a little, again, a little tacky. See how it's starting to pick that up? So you're done. Unless you want to add more ink, you can, but there's really no need because we're taking off 95% of this, okay? So there's no need to pour it on or paint it on. Just using the tool with the felt and the alcohol ink is going to be fine. That's all we need. There we are, okay? So once we're done, our alcohol ink background is dry. Alcohol ink has a drying time of 7 to 10 seconds. It's fine. And what we're going to do to remove this is we're going to work with steel wool. Now, I'm not a fan of steel wool. I've talked about it forever. I hate the way it feels. It's disgusting. So what I do is I take a little bit of steel wool, I peel some of it off, and I stick it onto a blending tool because steel wool will stick to that Velcro. I also don't like all the little fibery fuzz that goes out because those are just little bits of steel wool. I don't want that. So I'm going to work in my splat box. I have a piece of paper down at the bottom so I can easily dump whatever out in the garbage. And all we're going to do is take the steel wool and we're going to remove the ink. So you'll see that I'm just going to, just as if I were blending ink, just go in different directions And you can see right away, look at that. It takes off the alcohol ink, but it leaves it in all those little grooves, all the little dents of the folder, the little rivets. So you can take off as much as you want. So if you just wanted to, I'll just go lightly just to show you. If you wanted to lightly remove that, see? Or you can bring it down to metal. So you get to do whatever you want. So again, let's say this wasn't a riveted background, right? Let's say this was a botanical with florals, and let's say you did alcohol inks and pinks and whatever. Same technique. Same. You would just do pretty colors. You could take steel wool and you burnish over the top to reveal that metallic, and you're going to leave some of the color in all of those little crevices. It's that simple. So now I'm going to take this. Okay, look at all those little steel wool. Oof. Nothing on my hands. Nice. Get rid of that. And then I'm going to take a paper towel just to make sure I don't have any extra little bits on there. And I'll wipe this off. So as I said before, this is all about technique. I'm going totally steampunk because that's what I like, but you get to do what you want. Crazy transformation, right? But look at how industrial that is. I love it. And I like steel wool because steel wool is very soft. If you try to do this with sandpaper, you're going to end up with actual scratches, like creating just scuffs in there. Yeah, I agree. Definitely a good tip on steel wool, the blending tool, especially if you're like me and you don't like it. It is good. I absolutely hate it. Yeah. And honestly, I would used to say, Mario, will you do steel wool on this? Because I hate touching it. Or I'd put gloves. I know.
Yeah, but you don't even like those.
I don't like those microfiber cloths. Those things drive me absolutely crazy. Okay. So I have alcohol ink on my mat. You could leave it there if you want. Or if you want to clean it, you can use rubbing alcohol, which is what I have in this dropper. Or again, if you have your sanitizer, whatever works. So that's how you clean off alcohol ink. Alcohol ink comes off with alcohol. But like I said, if you clean as you go, you don't have to worry about working in mess. And there was just a little bit of ink on there. See, not much at all, but now it's clean, stays clean. Okay, so now we've got this. We've got this wonderful piece and we're going to apply it to our heart. So what I'm gonna do is take some scissors. Now you can work with whatever scissors you want. I'm working with my tonic shears because, well, they're long, they're big, and I like the fact that I could just go in and I can make full cuts through a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 to cut off sections. And that's really what I'm doing. I'm just going to go in and decide, okay, I think I want to have like these panels. And it's really important, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, that you go in and if you're going to do this patchwork look, go in and cut this into pieces first. Because if you don't, you're just going to drive yourself absolutely batty picking and choosing the perfect piece each time, right? So here you see this little square. I know I want to use that piece. I think that's going to be kind of a really cool piece to work with. So that's okay to cut it out right there. That's going to give me a panel. We're going to still trim this down even more, but if you at least chop up your panel, then as you go, you can cut it smaller. But if you don't, I just fear that you're going to like spend 10 minutes looking for the perfect place to cut out to put it there when at the end of the day, it's honestly not going to matter. There's going to be some cool pieces that you may like see that little panel? I really love that panel. In fact, I use that panel on the top of my heart right there. You see that little panel? So if you know it's something you like from a background, in this case, it's going to be that, go ahead and cut out that panel, right? The nice thing about a shear is that I can work from the front or the back. And so instead of making little snips into the foil, it's just easier to make that one clean cut. They're very long scissors, but they were designed really to just cut that 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 in half. So I'm going to trim that up to the edge. Now you'll notice, and I'll hold this up, that I don't cut it. Let's see if I can. There you go. I don't cut it right on the edge because I want to leave that drop shadow in there, right? Because it's going. You'll see when you apply it, it's just going to meld itself into the background. All right. So here we go. We're going to work on our heart, and the beauty of this, as I mentioned, peel and stick. So I'm just going to peel this and I'm going to stick this. Now, when you do this, the great thing about this is it's completely pliable. So see, I just stick, and it will stick to styrofoam. So once I do this, it's metal. So I'm not going to take my finger or your tongue or whatever and go right along the edge. Use your work surface to just provide the contour, right? I'm not taking a bone folder either. I'm just using it to provide the contour. And see how that goes right around it? Just from using your work surface, okay? That's what we want to do. We're just going to keep going and build that patchwork. So now I've got this here. It's like, okay, well, let's see. What do I want to do next? Well, I want to cover up all the styrofoam. That's the goal, at least on the front half. The back is not that big of a deal, but I want to at least go past the halfway point so you don't see any of it. So the next thing is going to be this piece. Well, I don't need all of it. So now I can go in and chop that down, and we're just going to peel and stick. And it comes off really easy. It's very, very sticky stuff. Not super forgiving. So you can decide, hey, okay, well, I really like that little, let's just say that square right there. See that? So I'm putting it right up against the edge. You could overlap it if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter. But now I'm going to go over that round part. You might think, well, that seems a little crazy for this metal. Nope, that's a nice thing. I'm just going to push first and then go in, just using the table to form that. Look at that. So simple. I've done this on Easter eggs. I've done this on pumpkins at Halloween. Really, you can apply this technique to whatever you want. It's pretty simple. Okay, we're going to take more of this and we're going to apply it. So I'm just looking at my seams and deciding, oh, I really want that to show. So that's what I'm putting there. Now, if it's a piece that you don't necessarily care about, like this one, I'm just going to wrap this around the point. I'm just going to push that in, and same thing, just going to go on my table. So as I mentioned, for Valentine's Day, this is the time that you can go and find so many cool shapes, or any time of the year. If there's a shape that you like, a heart, a clover, whatever that is, this is the time you just go and buy them. It doesn't matter what they look like, because they're always going to end up being transformed. So here I need to cover this side. This seems like a pretty good piece to do that. So I'm just going to peel this off, and we're going to stick this down. And it's okay that I overlap what's there, right? Bring that right around, and see how wrinkly it is? Like, look at that. It looks terrible, but it's not when you just use your table. Just use that media mat. The other reason why I like tempered glass is because I don't have to worry about scuffing anything. So far, so good, right? It's looking awesome. Okay. Now I still have my little panel there. I even like this little piece here. I think this piece is super interesting. So I'm going to cut that one off. I'll put it in with this is my good pile. This is my kind of used pile. And I'm going to keep going. So here I need to go in and cover this part up. So all you're doing is looking at what you want to cover up. And if this was going to be, say, an ornament, well, then you're going to want to cover the whole thing. But because I know I'm going to adhere it into the box, I'm only going to worry about the front part. So again, as I'm going around, you can see that. If you want to cut this into a pleat, you can, but this tape is designed to be formed and molded. So again, just using this. Well, here's the cool thing. Your media mat is a ruler. So I can just place this down in the corner, and it is 2 by 2. See? Squares? So like 2 1/4, 2 1/4. But yeah, your corner down here, which you can't see in the camera, but it's a 0, right? So here, I'll move this so you can see what I'm talking about. There we go. You see this? This is a 0 ruler. So this goes 0 to 12 and 0 to 14. So whenever I want to measure something, you just put it in that corner, and right there, you're like, okay, 2 1/4, 2 1/4, right? If it was a frame and you're like, oh, what size is this? Okay. So this is a 4 3/4 by 3 1/2. It's an easy reference if you always remember to use it. Yeah, of course. Okay. Moving right along. So now we've got this. So for the most part, I'm covered, except I still have a little spot there. So let's take some more of that tape. Peel this off. So simple. And we're going to place this down. So even in that little crease right there, I'm still just going to place this down. Make sure that the tape is going to cover it, and just fold this around the back. Okay. Now this you're going to have to go in with your fingers, because the table is not going to allow you to go into that area. But see how easy it is to form? So for the most part, I'm covered. If you look around, you can see that the whole, we'll just say the front half is covered. Now that it's covered, now do the things that matter. And I think that's an important lesson to learn when you're making. And I say this a lot when I'm teaching class. Don't waste time on things that don't matter, right? We talk about backgrounds a lot. That don't waste time on a background. It's in the background. You're going to cover it up. Don't waste time on your first layer. Get something down there, because now this really cool piece that I want, well, I'm going to place it right there, because that's where I want it to be. And I'm going to fold this around. And now it just looks like that's exactly part of the background, but it wasn't. Does that make sense? So it's just about going in and using the elements you want later. So many times, and I've just learned this through the years that, you know, I've spent so much time going, oh, I got to position this, or oh, I need to rotate this 45 degrees this way. And then at the end of the day, it's all covered up and you're like, oh, well, that was good job, Captain Obvious. So here, placing that, I'm going to wrap that around. And so now I've got that band on there. And you can see how just the heart is really getting more personality. And that's where you get to find those little cool nuggets of good, like that little square right there. That's a nugget of good right there. And I'll keep it. I'll even keep one of those little rivets. See? Look at that. Neat, right? Peel that off. And so this is the nice thing about this foil tape, is like I mentioned, it's thick enough that when I'm doing all of this shaping, it doesn't lose its shape, because that's what I found flashing tape always did. It would lose its shape when I would be kind of a bit aggressive with it. So here I'm just going to place that down and fold that over. There we are. Cool. I'm good with that. Have another little strip, right? Little strip. Well, I'm going to use it because I just picked it up. Sometimes I do that. If you pick it up, do it. The other thing to keep in mind is, let's say you were making more of these. Don't get in your head where you have to do it exactly like the last one, right? There might be an element that you liked of it, but don't be so consumed that everything has to be matchy-matchy. All right, so now I'm going to take the heart, just going to make sure that everything's formed. I'll hold it up just to show you what it looks like finished. And there it is. Wow, amazing transformation from a styrofoam heart or a plastic candy or whatever it is into a cool industrial piece of whatever. And like I said, this could have been on a box, on even something home decor. I've seen people do this on lamp bases, and there's so many cool things that you can do with this technique. And the more you do it, obviously you can keep all your scraps. Like this is a piece I haven't used, so I'll use that on another project, maybe a card, or wrap it around. But all these other pieces done, right? Cool. So this is what we've got. Now we've got our great little heart for the background. All right. So now that our heart is done, we're going to go back to the box, and everything's dry. How do you know if it's dry? If you touch it and it's not wet, it's dry. If it still feels tacky, like there was a little bit of tackiness right there, you just go in. And I say that because, well, that's a funny to me. That would be a laugh track playing, right? Ha, 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 ha. But yeah, if it feels wet, that means it's wet. And if it feels dry, it is dry, because collage medium is totally a matte medium. And so it doesn't really look wet unless it's really gloppy. So I'm just going to go with the heat tool. Another thing, I'm a chronic craft tool user, just to make sure everything is completely dry before we move on. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to alter this. We're going to take this clean box that has these edges, and we're just going to grunge it up. We're also going to take this painted frame and give it more of a vintage tarnished silver vibe. And to do that, I'm going to work with distressed crayons. Distressed crayons, probably next to ink pads, one of my most favorite distressed mediums. These are a water reactive pigment. They are not permanent, but they're only blendable when wet, and they don't move after they're dry, unless of course you wet it or you lick it, right? As I always say, don't lick your work. I'm going to go back to a baby wipe because they're water reactive. When I'm doing this, I want to just use moisture, say from a baby wipe or my fingertips versus a spray bottle. So just a little tip that I like when it comes to working with the crayons. So first thing, let's do the box. And I'm going to do the box with brown. This happens to be walnut stain, my favorite, but you can do really whatever color you want. And because we have that layer of collage medium, this is going to allow that crayon to glide over the surface just with moisture. So I have a little moisture on my hands from the baby wipe. And look at that. Look at how easily grunge it is. So you don't have to waste your time inking the edges of your paper first. If you try to put ink pads on here, ink pads are really challenging to control in this kind of environment, you know, getting it there, because I could still go in, add some crayon and make this corner like really grungy, right? Or if you don't like it, let's say you put some on like that and you're like, ooh, bad. Just get your finger wet and it'll come right off. It's totally water reactive. You even get that little nugget of crayon off. So if you wipe this off, look, back to the beginning. But that's because this was wet. Once the crayon dries, it's not going to come off unless it's wet, all right? So just go around. So could you go in just with your crayon and do all of your coloring first and then your blending? Absolutely you can. But I just like to work like this. Just now I'm holding the box because I'm just able to get a little bit more shape. Just take my crayon and just go around. I love this, the smudge factor of a crayon. So good. And like I said, if you don't want to do brown, you can smudge in white if you're going shabby chic. You can do blues and pinks and greens and whatever it is. This is just a way that you can shade a background. So let's say you were doing something springtime and you were gluing ephemera and you wanted to have a little bit of yellow, make it look like a sun glow. Well, then you would just use a crayon, right? Whether it was squeezed lemonade or scattered straw. And that's what I'm trying to say. Like, take this for what it is. Yes, we're making something grungy and steampunk, but these ideas you can adapt in your everyday make just by how you use a certain medium. And the reason the crayons are being so forgiving and moving around is because of that layer of collage medium. If you did not have that layer of collage medium, the crayon is going to want to set into the paper. It'll move a little bit, but it won't move nearly like this. So that's why we did collage medium, because we're going to do crayon on this. And that's why we did it. So again, just going in. Now for the inside, I'm just going to go in, draw a line. That's it. You know, I'm not going to try to shove the crayon into the corner. That would be crazy because I can just use my finger for that. All right, just go in and just, see, moving that around. And I'm just touching that baby wipe as I see that maybe I'm not moving the medium as much. The baby wipe is just always going to make that crayon more reactive. If you were to spray this with water, I just think it's going to be a little too reactive. You know, you'll just end up pretty much dissolving most of the colorant, and I don't think you're going to get the effect that you want. And again, just a little grunge, just a little grunge around the edge. I always like to go back to the corners. You know, think of it like an old tattered cigar box or something, and really kind of muck up the corners. So here, instead of smoothing it around, I'm just kind of tapping on there. See the difference? So again, just go to any of those edges or corners and just smudge them a little heavier. That's just me. So that's why I'm never concerned about making sure that the paper goes edge to edge, right? It makes you really save a lot of time in your ish measuring. Measure to the nearest ish, right? 10-ish, 2-ish, but see that? Gosh, crayons, pure magic. Okay, simple, simple. Okay, again, just using my fingers to work that around. Okay, I'm happy with the box. Set that down. Crayons on there. When you're done, we'll clean them off, but we're going to go into black. Black's pretty mucky as well. So what I'm going to do with this, taking black soot distress crayon, I'm going to dry it. Now, your crayons, the other thing you need to keep in mind about the crayons, if you don't use them, right? If you have crayons, you're like, oh, Tim, I haven't used mine for, you know, a bazillion years. Well, that sounds great, but this is not the everlasting gobstopper. So if you have any kind of art mediums, an ink pad, a crayon, whatever, you need to use it because it will dry up eventually. And honestly, the stuff with the most pigment dries the quickest. So this one is a bit drier. Like you can kind of see it's still there, but this is now more like more of a waxy crayon, but it still totally works. So don't ever throw them out because you think that they don't, you know, they're not as creamy as the other colors. But if you use it, it kind of gets its life back. I don't know if there's a little film on it or whatever. So I'm getting my fingers wet from that baby wipe. And now I'm going in, look at that. Now I'm just moving that black around. I'm going to work here because I just find that I have a little bit more leverage if I can work on the mat. So instead of the box, here I just need to just go in and just move this. Could you take the baby wipe? Yes, but again, if you take the baby wipe, chances are you're going to wipe off the crayon versus moving it. And you could always go back and add more. So my advice is just to go in. I always like to have some reveal too. Just go in with one layer first, and then you could go back and add more. Don't get so caught up in, like, see, that's just like a little skippy line of black. That's all you need, because look at how much is there when I smudge it out, right? It's a lot. So if you start with too much crayon, then this part is really not fun because you're going to spend more time wiping it off, right? So once I have it kind of moved around, then I'll go in with the baby wipe. Sometimes I'll do this with a paper towel, and you can pat some of this off. See, like, look how that broke it up right there. See that? And you can still smudge it out, but taking something like this will just remove it in spots, And I think, see that? See how it just gives it more of a mottled look than a perfectly smudged look? So I'll just do that on the frame. Look at that. See? Gives it much more of a, there's a solid one. I'm trying to get it to focus. Here we go. And I'll just dab in some areas. Again, baby wipe. Okay. So we're done with the frame and that. Now we can go in and do our cleanup. So this is going to clean right off with a baby wipe because it's water reactive. It's going to clean right off of your hands. So even if your hands are literally covered in crayon, unlike ink, the crayons do not stain. So all of it will come right off. See, clean as you go. Clean as you go, Mario. All right, just going to dry that off with a dry paper towel. So far, so good? We doing all right, you guys? I'm reading the chat. You guys are chatting. It's nice. You're helping each other out where people are like, oh, I just got here. What did I miss? About an hour, I'm going to say. So here's what we've got. We've got our box with our frame. Look how nice and grungy. Ooh, looks so good, right? We've got our heart. And now we're going to work on some of the elements, right? Now, for me, I prefer to kind of work on the vignette box and then add my frame because the frame does add a little bit of a lip. And so I find it challenging to kind of work inside with the frame. But really, as a maker, you can do what works for you. If you feel that you can work inside the box, then you can go ahead and attach the frame. But I'm not going to do that yet. I'm just going to start working with the different elements that are going to go inside. Okay? So what I want to do next is I'm going to do the mechanics. Now that the base stuff is done, I need to do the mechanic features. The mechanic features, of course, are tiny lights. This is totally optional if you want to backlight that. I just think it's always that little surprise, which is good. That's awesome. Oh, happy anniversary. Nancy, happy anniversary. All right, so what we're going to do is I want to put my tiny lights in the back. You just kind of have to figure out where you want to position that hole through the box, right? You can measure it. I'm going to say it's about 2 inches down. So there again, I can place this onto, well, I'll place it here so you guys can see it, onto the media mat. And I know these little squares are an inch. So it's like, okay, 2 inches down is going to be here. And then that's about midway. Or you could even use your centering guide on your media mat if you're really like particular. See that heavy white line is centering. So you can place your box and go, okay, this white line is center. And that's 2 inches, and 2 inch from center is right there. So utilize this grid. It's more than just a pretty picture. It's actually a useful tool. Did you know that, Mario?
I learned that today.
There you go. See? Everyone's like, oh, it's such a pretty picture. I'm like, dude, this is like everything here. These white cross lines, like that's your center. So that's why you don't really need a ruler. You just place this down and go, okay, now that I know that this is there, that heavy white line is going to be center, right? But any of the lines are going to do the same thing, right? Get the idea? So I'm just going to take a drill. Now you can take a Dremel. I just like to use this little Fisker's drill. I've had this for, oh my gosh, eons, since my Ben Franklin days, because you can just put any regular drill bit. And I like the fact that I can turn the handle and drill through things without firing up a Dremel tool. So I'm just going to kind of visualize it there. Go, okay, that's where it needs to be. You just hold the base, turn, and yes, it's drilling through the wood. And yes, I'm drilling on my media mat because, well, it's not a power drill, so I know right when I went through. See, I didn't go all the way to the glass. You don't need to. So once that's done, you're just going to kind of go backwards. Normally, I would have another hand. I would hold the box, and you have a hole. Easy, through there. Okay, we're going to get rid of that. So let me put the drill back. Dust, sawdust, glitter, embossing powder off your media mat. Swiffer's the best for that. Okay, easy enough. Now let's get into some tiny lights. So tiny lights, this is how they come. They come 2 in a pack. They already have batteries in them. They're going to have a little plastic tab that you need to pull out. And there you go. They turn on. They have a little switch on and off. Ooh, these don't even turn off. Well done. This happens to me a lot, man.
No matter.
He's laughing. He'll fix it, probably because of battery, whatever, but it never fails. I'll either have one that doesn't work, or in this case, it just lights up. I should have known as soon as it lit up. Okay, there we go. Switch on and off. Because last time I think I talked about the battery saying, oh, the batteries don't have screws, and then I go to open it and it was screwed shut. So anyway, that's how a tiny light's supposed to work. If you have one that just stays on the whole time, well, email Advantis. Tell them you need a replacement, because I've never seen that. Oh, it's funny. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unwind the lights first. There's like a little bit of wire that holds them together. And then I'm just going to open these up. All right. This is a really thin wired light. I love these. These are just a warm light. For Halloween, we did colors last year. For Christmas, we have multicolor, which are pure magic. But the cool thing, again, is that you can open this little compartment. It pops open, and you can replace the batteries. And these are just T-Light batteries. There's a number on it, so you'll know which ones. And I just get my batteries from Amazon, all right? So you always want to make sure that your tiny lights work. See, case in point. If I didn't test them ahead of time and we had that set, well, they would just stay continuously illuminated. So here's what we're going to do next. We're going to feed our lights in from the back. And you can drill like whatever size hole you want to drill, but I just do one that's just kind of big enough for the light to go through. It's just easier to work from. And I'm just going to pull these through little at a time. There we go. Come on. Are you serious? Out of all lights, and I have one that's like a giant blob. There we go. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pull the tiny lights all the way through until you get to like this little plasticky thing. You see that? Okay. That's the part where it stops, and there's usually a light there. And what I like to do is once I have that in, I don't like to put this in my project. You can. It's just not as flexible. See, it's a plastic tube that goes around maybe the connection to the switch. So I don't like to try to hide it. These are easier to hide for me, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to seal it. Now, before I do, I want to check the lights one more time to make sure I didn't do anything when I ripped them through the hole. And then I'm going to take a glue gun. So I like to use this guy. This is from Surebonder. It's a little detail tip. I've had mine forever. I think they even upped the color now. They have it like a new color, which is pretty cool. Like maybe it's green or something. Yeah. So I put a little dot right in there. And here's another tip. When you squirt the glue, use the heat of the tip, like hover over it, and that's going to melt all your glue strings, right? If you squirt glue and you do the quick dismount, then you get all those little spider web things. Maybe that's you. You can melt them with a heat tool later. But if you're ever applying glue, apply it and then just lift the tip off the surface and then just move it in a circular motion because that tip is hot. If you've ever used a glue gun, you know that that's the zinger factor. But by putting in that little bit of glue, now I'm not worrying about my lights falling backwards. And sometimes if you've ever used tiny lights, it's happened to me more than I care to admit. I'll put my tiny lights through whatever project, not realizing that 3 or 4 of them fell back out through the hole. And now you have extra tiny lights. And that is so annoying. All right. So same thing, they work. Okay, here we go. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my lights, and because I'm just going to create a backlight, right? I just want them kind of hidden. I'm going to just do a cluster. But could you take the lights and string them up in the corners? Yes, go for it. You can do however you want to string these. But what I'm going to do is just take my fingers and I'm going to wrap these lights around. Now the tiny lights, they can be trimmed, meaning if you don't want to use all the lights, you can cut this wire anywhere, and then the rest of the stuff, in other words, the lights that are not connected to the battery pack, are gone. They're garbage. You can't use them another place other than just wire. But here I'm just going to wrap this around, just around my fingers, right? You see how I've got that little twisty? So here's what I'm going to do next. This is a bit kind of challenging. The other thing I want to point out when I'm using a glue gun, look where I put the glue gun. Non-stick matte. Because any glue that drips down is just going to peel right off. Hot glue that goes on your glass, well, some of it will peel off, but usually you have to scrape it off with a razor blade. So remember, messy, sticky stuff, that's why this media mat is a must-have. You know, you've got your work surface, you got your non-stick surface, and now I'm always working in a nice, clean, tidy area. Okay, so I'm going to take my lights, and I've got this little nest. Can you guys see that? So here's what I need to do. I'm going to try to do this and talk at the same time, which I'm a little frightened of because, you know, when I do hot glue, I pay attention. I usually get close. I breathe on it. I'm sure a lot of you are the same way. Yeah, I'm like, okay. So I'm using my remnant rub tool. I've talked about this in many, many demos because it's a great tool for rub-ons. It's got that like rounded edge, but it's got this little flat metal edge. It's solid metal, so it stays cold and it's non-stick. And I use it to press down hot glue. Not really a fan of Teflon-y stuff, plastic stuff for glue because, well, it's kind of annoying. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tuck the end somewhere into that nest. I'm going to try to keep the lights pretty much around that circle. You see that? I've kind of just circled that. They're still flexible so I can move them, but here's the important thing. you want to try to put hot glue on the wire area and avoid the light bulbs. I have put hot glue on a light bulb and it's been okay, but then there's times, I don't know why, maybe it's just one of those flukes that I put hot glue on a light bulb and then the strand didn't work anymore. So I always try to just put glue where the wires are. So I'm just going to hold the wires like that. I'm going to take the glue. I'm going to put a pretty generous blob, right through there. Just again, see, I just used the tip to melt that string that I saw. Now I'm going to use the flat part of this, and that's going to allow me to press this down. So I'm pressing down the wires and the glue onto the back, because just doing a dot of glue is not going to do anything. You have to press it down, spread it out. But by using the angle part of this, you see, that's providing the pressure that it needs. It's also allowing me to flatten this out without using my finger. And then I just wait until the glue is cool and it releases the tip. There you go. Totally clean, right? But now, look, I've got like a nice, see that glue seal? See how flat it is? Holding down the lights. Now they're not springing out everywhere. So much easier. Could you try to use tape or whatever? Yeah, sure, go ahead. Now, if your glue doesn't stick to the background, like see, this was just about connecting the wires. Don't worry about that, because the wires are going to be fine as far as keeping themselves in place. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. So again, holding it. I just like it. That's all. I mean, it's a rub-on tool, but I've told you, I use it for scoring paper because of the edge that's rounded, the little stylus. It's not good for shaping. I tried to use it to shape the flowers before the Sizzix tool, and no, it's too tiny, but it works. Okay, so again, I'm just holding that in place. I see a lot of people, yeah, looking for shopping. I see there's links. Definitely check your local store. I know there's a lot of stores that are shipping as well, which is good. Okay, holding that there, and then again, all I take is the tool and I just kind of wiggle it back and forth, and you'll hear it just pop off. If it's not popping off, it's not cool. So don't rip it off. So there we go. Now we have this little nest secured in there. Now let's just hope that it still works. There we go. Still works. Okay. So we're good. And because this is still like a round nesty shape, that's why I like to do this. That's why I don't like to wrap it around something solid, is because when I go and build this, if I want to move stuff, I have that option to do it. Okay. Does that make sense? Perfect. All right. Easy enough. Now, could we go in and add our heart? Yes, but first I want to add the gears. And you could do the gears before or after. There's room to make it work. It's completely up to you. Totally optional. In fact, I'll just do the heart just because I talked about it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to glue the heart onto that little nest. I'm going to center it. So what I'm going to do for my glue, because this is hollowed inside, I'm going to actually apply the glue here. Okay, because normally I would have applied it to my surface and set it in there, but because this inside is like a nest, I don't want to use a ton of glue to fill up that void. So this would be the case that I'm applying glue to this object. And I'm just going to apply some hot glue to the back of the heart. Again, just kind of scribbly. See, do your little swirly dismount, get rid of those glue strings. Place it down, decide where you want to put it over that nest of stuff, and we're going to hold it, okay? And I want to hold it because I want my heart to be, well, level or wherever you want it to be. If you just set it in there, you're relying on gravity to be your friend. And sometimes that, is going to turn or it's going to do this. So just hold on to it for a second. Easy enough. Hot glue doesn't take very long to dry. Not at all. Okay. Excellent. There we go. So we're done. Secure in place. So I use hot glue anytime something's going to be quick. And that was the other thing that I wanted to share with you about this project, is that sometimes I'll make where I only use collage medium, and other times I want a quick make, and so I want some hacks. And well, that's what I'm going to share today, mixed media hack. And those that are working on ideology right now might be gasping when they see how I'm going to attach all of this metal on the background. But hey, you'll be all right. So we're going to use some elements. I'm going to work with several different trinkety bits. So I'll just talk about them real quick and then I'll use them so I don't have to stop each time. I'm going to use some word bands. So word bands, these are part of ideology. They just have little words and quotes in there, but you could use quote chips or whatever you had. I'm going to use an arrow adornment. These have been in the line forever. I love the look of these arrows, especially at Valentine's Day, but they come in different sizes. I'm going to work with some gadget gears. Now, these are the biggest gears in ideology right now. But we also have some other sizes, mini gears, regular sprocket gears, but these are the biggest ones, and I'm gonna work with those. Then I'm also going to work with hardware heads. Now these are just little flat things that look like the heads of hardware, like screws and washer nuts and things like that, but they're just flat, and they allow you to glue over the top. So when you look in there, see that little word band? See how it looks like it's screwed onto the gears? Smoke and mirrors, my friend. So these are great whenever you want it to look like you attach something. So let's say you glue an embellishment to, say, the cover of a book, but you can't put a brad through it or something, or an eyelet or a nail. So gluing one of these hardware heads makes it look like you secured it properly instead of just gluing something that's got a hanging hole, right? That's like an assemblage no-no, that you just glue something down that should be attached another way. So that's the cool thing about this. It allows you to hide those, but it also makes really cool detail. Looks like rivets. And then there's even machine heads. I'm not using these, but I like to talk about them because this is just a giant version of these. So if you're doing bigger things, again, a journal cover, a picture frame, and you want it to look like you kind of screwed it together, these are great because they're flat backed and you just glue them on. So it's a really nice embellishment that we're going to do. Okay, so I've got my stuff already set aside. I'm not going to use all of it. So for the gears, I'm just going to determine what gears I want to put. So for my other one, I use that. Oh, it still fits under there nicely. I just set it there for now. And then I used this little guy over here, and then I wanted to layer that little one there. Again, you could use whatever ones you want, but those are the ones that I decided to use. Then we've got our band, and I chose the same word band, the know in your heart you're loved. And I've got my little hardware heads here, and these are tiny, they're flat. This time I'm going to go for a flat screw instead of a little Phillips screw, and I'll show you that. But you'll notice on this that these, like especially from a distance, you can't really read it. They're great when you read up close, but you can't really read it. But this one, woo, pops out, shows up nice. Again, another tip that we're going to do. So let me just take these gears out for now. Even got to get this little guy out. See, that's why I like to work without the frame. Okay, and I'm going to alter these using a crayon. Now, could you do this with acrylic paint? Yes, but a crayon, there again, because it's that pigment's really thick, it goes right into those little grooves. Okay, so I just scribble over the top, see that? And then just taking your finger, you're just gonna work that pigment into the recessed areas. It dries really quick, and it also is super opaque. And the nice thing like this, see how like loved, well, didn't get enough color? Just go right over the top. This with a little more crayon. So there you have it. You could do red if you wanted, or if you wanted a certain word of color, you could do that as well. And you're just going to use your fingers. I don't use a paper towel for this because a paper towel tends to dig it out. And then it just seems like a vicious creative circle where you're adding, wiping, adding, wiping. So just use your fingers for this. And the same thing on these little hardware heads. See, a little white crayon, but when I just kind of work that around, see how they just look a little kind of crusty, and they're going to match this word band. All right, there we go. Put this down. So now we've got that prepped. I will go back to a baby wipe, clean off that white crayon. Simple. And we'll talk about other adhesives, because now we're going to talk about some different ways that we can use adhesives, right? You don't need one. That's the other thing that, you know, I think anyone that's been a maker more than, well, probably more than a week, you realize that there is just not one magical anything, right? There's different tools and different adhesives for all sorts of different things. And so far we've been working with collage medium for our paper. We used hot glue for those very lightweight things. This happens to just be styrofoam and some wire, and that does the trick. But when it comes to other things, heavier things, there's certain glues that really are going to do a better job. Now, when it comes to metal, okay, we're talking cold connection, metal to metal, I use collage medium. The reason I don't use hot glue is temperature sensitive. And so metal to metal, it will stick at first, but as soon as the metal cools off again, it could pop right back off. Okay, so I just don't use hot glue for a metal to metal contact. I'm going to use collage medium. This is the same as this. Okay, it's the same matte collage medium. This is in a jar for backgrounds. This is in a wonderful detail tip for embellishments. And the beauty of this is collage medium will shrink as it dries. So even if you have glue ooze that kind of spreads out, this is going to shrink behind your embellishment when it dries. And I like that because I can glue plastic things, sequins. I can do anything I want with collage medium. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding, just using that needle tip. Let me get it to focus. See that little bit of glue around the edge? Not a lot, just a little bit. I'm going to do that around both ends of my word band. And notice where I'm gluing. I'm gluing on the craft mat because if I get glue on the side, it's not a big deal. Now, when you're done with this, you're just going to give it a couple of thunks standing up. Same idea with glossy accents. That gets the glue out of this nozzle. And then when you put the cap on, it doesn't clog. Okay? Just that thunk will get the glue out of the nozzle. So I'm going to take these little guys and I'm going to place it on the edge and I'm going to slide it through that glue that I just put on the edge until I'm happy with it, and you leave it. The other thing to remember about cold connection is it's not instant. So you can't just glue that down and pick it up and swing it around over your head. It's just not going to work. So once you place it down, set it aside. Give it some time to dry. Okay, so I'm going to do that first because I want it to dry, and we're going to focus on the gears. Now, we could alcohol ink these, we could grit paste these, we could do a lot of things, but the whole point of this was just to show you that you can take some elements and throw something together really quick, if not for yourself, for someone you love. So here's what I'm going to do for these guys. Are you ready? Yes, foam adhesive. So could I use collage medium? Yes, you can. But collage medium, in order to build layers, is going to take a while, because if I stack these, see how they're not flat? You can hear that too. If you do this with collage medium, you have to glue this one to the back, then this one, and then now it's suspended, so you're going to need to let that dry, and then you have to glue this one and let that dry as you build. So if you have time, collage medium would totally do the job. But if you don't have time and you just want to embellish something, getting a really nice foam adhesive is going to work. This is my favorite of all time. It is scrapbook adhesive. No, I don't work for them. It's just been my go-to. It is a black core. So when I use it behind embellishments, I don't have to go in and color the edges with a Sharpie or anything. It's just good. That's all I can say. I've used it forever. It's just good. Yeah. So now I'm going to go to my regular scissors, and I'm just on the sheet. I'm just going to cut this into thirds, because I find that if you cut your adhesive on the sheet versus in the air, you don't have to worry about the pieces sticking to your scissor, right? How many times have you had a foam square and you go to cut it and half of it sticks to the inside of your scissor? I mean, come on. That just allows me to just cut that little right there on the sheet. Who cares? This, you throw it away anyway, so why not just cut through it? All right, so now I'm just going to take the adhesive. I'm going to go to the back of the gear, and I'm just going to place some pieces wherever I want. So I've got my 3 little strips. I don't need a ton of it. It's flexible, so it's going to allow me. And really, the scrapbook adhesive is so strong, so it's going to go on metal. So there we go. 3 pieces on the back. I'm just going to, I also like the fact of it's so easy to remove those little pieces. So now I'm going to take this. This is going to be my first gear. I already know it's going to go in the corner. So I'm just going to place it down, press it down, done. Moving right along. So next, I'm just going to move right up in the same thing. I'm just going to do my cuts with the scissor, make my little strips, and we'll move on to the next gear. So simple, really. And all those little pieces come off, ready to go. We'll take the next gear. Do you have to use 3? No, you can use whatever you want, but I always find that if I kind of create a little, I guess, tripod of sorts, it's more balanced, but again, you do you. So far that's only 2 squares, not like 30, because we're trying to build a house. So next we're going to take this. Now I want my adhesive to try to make contact with the back of the box. So I'm going to place it in against the back of the box and make that contact. In any place it overlaps, who cares? It's a bonus, right? Or if I want to push it flat, I can do that too. But the foam is what's giving me that flexibility. So see how strong that is? It's just good flexibility for embellishments. And like I said, could you have done this with collage medium? Yes, but you would be waiting. Because if you were trying to go like this with collage medium, everything would be slipping and sliding around. Collage medium, I would say minimum 15 minutes to set. And you want it to be, gosh, hours before it's completely permanent, So here we go. We're going to add another little foam. Here's my last little bit of foam. And place that down. Easy enough? So far, so good. Cool. Now, if you don't want all of them dimensional, I know that they make this foam square like even thinner than this, but I think Paula knows more because Paula uses like a thick and a thin version. I just have one because, well, I don't know. I'm not cool like that. Okay. stick that down. So there we go. All 3 of those gears on there, secure, dimensional. How great is a hack? Like so quick. Black foam adhesive from Scrapbook Adhesives. So you can, and I don't know if they have other things. I really don't know. I don't know if they do things other than squares. I mean, I know that the company does, but I don't know if the black comes in anything other than squares. But again, I like this over a roll because it's just easy for me to maneuver instead of peeling off areas from the roll. So now I'm going to use this. Now I'll tell you this. Are these completely dry? No. But are they strong enough to stick down? Yes. They're not going to slide off, but I still want to be careful. So on this, I'm just going to, because of the width of this, I'm just going to cut this one in half. So usually you'll see I just go in and hack off the paper because that would drive me crazy. I just go in and I'm just going to cut this one in half. And I've got both of these little squares. And I'll flip this over. So I'm going to slide it off so I'm going to try not to nudge those hardware heads. Just going to place that adhesive along the back. And we're going to peel this off. And peel this off. Whoop. And press it on there. Oh, I'm trying to be so careful. This is where, like, making something live, you know that you'd have your tongue sticking out. You'd have it like an inch away from your face as you're sticking this on. Don't think that I'm the only one that does that. Set that down. Decide like where you want it to go. See, it's really sticky. It doesn't even want to move. And I just set it there for now. Okay, does that look pretty even? Pretty good to me. It's a little wonky, so I'm just going to fix it first. Can you tell? I normally have this so close to my face. All right, Holtz. All right, I'm good with that. So once you're happy, press that all down. Like just take your fingers and just press it in. And now you're secure. You're set. And everything can still like be a little adjusted, but for the most part, like we're good to go. All right. So on this, you see how like this is kind of loose? Don't worry about it. The wire should hold it up. If you're bothered though, we can still move this. So I'm going to press those lights down and I'm going to even go in and I'm going to add a little bit of glue because see how this, I just don't like that. It's like a loose tooth. So I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue. I'm going to go in, just squirt a little glue. There we go. That's the other nice thing about that detail is that it has that long little schnozzle. So you can go in and do that. All right, hold that for a second. Move this, put the cap on the scissor, can multitask. It's easy to do. Okay, all right. So once this is down, we're going to place our frame over the top. Now our frame, could you do hot glue? Yes, I don't like to do hot glue either. Really, hot glue is just for super thin things. That's when I use it. So I'm gonna go in with some collage medium. And I'm going to go on the frame. Now, I don't want to put it on the frame because the frame is wider than the box. If you do, well, you're just wasting a lot of collage medium. Not the end of the world, but here it's just going to allow me to go in, just that nice little needle tip, make your little scribbly line. Okay, and you could see it's like such a fine line. That's what I love about it. It's got a great viscosity. It's just super strong. That's how I like. Give it that little thunk. I always wipe off just the top. Okay, now we're going to take our frame and we're just going to place it down. Just goes right over that collage medium. See, just like that. Press it down. Now, because the boxes and the frames are handmade, you're going to want to hold this, right? You're going to want to hold it. Maybe you have some clamps. If you don't have clamps, get a rubber band. That's the easiest thing to put around it is a rubber band. So, Mario, can you throw me a couple rubber bands real quick? Because normally I would use clamps, but I don't want to use clamps on the live because I would set it on my table. Thank you very much. But you can just take rubber band, right? And just put that on there. Okay, that's going to hold that down. So anytime you need to dry something structural like this, these guys are your friend. There you have it. Simple. So now that's drying. Now I don't have to sit there for an hour and hold on to it. Okay, that's important. So next up, we're going to do our finishing touch, which is this little arrow, okay? And you don't have to do the arrow. Maybe you want to use a key, right? I've got so many different embellishments. Gosh, I've got a whole little thing. Like maybe you want a key or a ruler or you want to put a butterfly. Or maybe you don't put anything. You can put whatever you want on there. But because it's Valentine's Day, I just kind of thought the whole heart, arrow, Cupid thing was charming. So wanted to share another little tip with you. So the adornment arrows, any of the adornments, I like to start them out in silver. And most of ideology has pretty much gone to this direction, kind of an antique silver. But they don't have to stay this way. If you ever want to change the color, so see how from the silver we went to kind of this antique gold. If you have any alcohol ink mixatives or the new alloys, these are metallic alcohol inks and they will dry really nice on metal. Could you use distress paint? You could. Distress paint is permanent on metal, but because this is an ink, it goes on really thin. In fact, I just shake it up. I normally apply some to my finger and I just rub right over the embellishment. So I don't go in with a paintbrush or anything, just kind of treat it almost like a metallic rub, but it dries and it's permanent, right? It's really quick, it dries in seconds. So that's what I did to this one, or just kind of rub this on, right? You could just do any alcohol ink. It could be a color, so if you didn't want it to be metallic, could you do pink or red or anything? Yes, alcohol ink just on your finger, rub that on, because then you can still see some of that silver. And that's what I like about that. It just gave it more of a, I guess, a tarnished look than a painted look. Well, that's it, okay? So here's how we're going to attach this. I'm going to attach it using another adhesive, a totally different kind. And not because, like, really, outside of collage medium, these adhesives are not part of my line. It's just what I use as a maker. The reason I like to use this is called red line tape. Red line tape, also I call it baloney tape because it's got this little red thing that you have to pull off the back of it, but it comes in different widths, right? So you can use it for a lot of things. This is super duper strong. So red line tape is like, it's almost like super glue, but it's a tape, okay? So it will allow you to stick metal to metal. It is also heat stable. It is embossable. So like I use this thin one a lot, and I won't get into that demo right now, but like I'll take this and it's sticky on the back. I'll stick it along a card or something, peel this off, cover it with embossing powder, and then heat it, and you have a perfectly clean embossed line. And so that's why I like different widths, because this is a heat stable tape. If you try to do this with like score tape or something else, it's going to bubble and ripple. It's not designed for heat. So I use it for embossing, but I'm also going to use it for metal. So I'm going to take the back of this arrow. It's very skinny, and that's just going to allow me to use my skinny tape. So I'll start off the edge, right? Go straight across, give yourself a little head start, peel that back. We'll take our scissor, snip this off, okay? There we go. Simple enough, little piece of red line tape on the back. Make sure that tape is nice and burnished, meaning you've rubbed over it so it's stuck down. And then we're gonna pull off the back. Now, I will say that red line tape is not nearly as forgiving as those little foam squares, so I need a pick. My eyes need a pick, because that's why I call it baloney tape. That little baloney film, that little pink film, it's a booger. All right, so that's why I give myself a head start, because if you're like most makers, you kind of just completely butcher that first little bit, and that's fine. I got my pick under there. Then I pinch this between the pick and my finger, and then it allows me to pull it off because, well, I don't have fingernails, so I can't do pinchy grab. So that's why I do that with the craft pick. Okay, so next we're going to adhere this to the heart. So let's go back to adhesives. Could I have done this with hot glue, metal to metal? No, right? Because we know that that's temperature sensitive. Could I have done this with collage medium? Yes, but I would need to wait minimum 15 minutes, more like 30 minutes before I could work with it. So this adhesive is going to be instant, and it's going to allow me to kind of position that arrow right in the frame. See that? So it's still inside. And then I'm going to press it onto that heart, okay? And really make a good connection. And it's on there. I mean, if I were to take this off, I would end up ripping the heart out of the box, okay? So there you go. So that's that nice secured motion. But what I want to do is I want to make it look like, well, that I thought through it and I attached it and I stitched it onto the heart. That little detail right there. And here's how I did that little detail. Little detail is done using jump rings. Could you use wire? Yes, you do you. But I like jump rings because of the thickness, the gauge of that metal. But if you try to get thick wire like this at the craft store, the hardware store, it's really rigid. It's really hard to work with, in my opinion. And because jump rings are already bent, it just gives me a little bit of freedom. Plus, the Ideology jump rings come in 3 different finishes, so I can match it up if I wanted to do brass. I already have that. And they come in different diameters. I'm using the small one because it's just going around a small little piece. But if you were going to attach, let's say, a gear, you could use the same technique if you wanted a gear to look like it's attached to a piece of chipboard with wire. It's a great hack. And so here's how I do it. Okay, so these are Ideology jump rings. So these jump rings, they start as a jump ring. And the reason I like these jump rings is because honestly, they're designed to use with your fingers. You can twist it open and it's got a little memory wire in it. So you twist back and then it springs in and lines up every time. So that's what I love about these jump rings. But for this, because I want them to look more like, well, like a cable tack. If you've ever tried to tack an extension cord or a cable down, they have these little cable tacks that you hammer in. And that's what I wanted to achieve, these almost little horseshoe things. So you're going to get yourself a pair of needle nose pliers. You can do this with regular needle nose pliers. I have a whole little jewelry kit, so I have these flat pliers. You see how flat they are? But you could use regular needle nose, but these flat ones are really nice because it will allow me to find the end of the jump ring, that is the little split right there, and I'm just going to grab it with these flat pliers and I'm going to squeeze it, and that's going to flatten it out. Look at that. Done. That's simple. And I can just work my way up the jump ring, flatten it, and then I move to the other side and I'm just squeezing it and then it flattens it. And then I go a little higher and there you go. Ta-da. Simple. Want to see it again? Okay, here we go. It's like a magic trick. Want to see that again? Really simple because I like simple things. So I find the end, I squeeze it with those flat pliers. That makes a straight edge. I go a little bit higher just to create more of a straight line. Turn it over to the other side. You can see it's a hook. I'm going to grab it. I'm just going to squeeze it and I'm going to move up and I'm going to squeeze it. Ta-da. There you go. And if you want these to be smaller, you could squeeze it together, but that's why I like having the different size jump rings, because this is going to make little small tacks and large jump rings are going to make larger ones, right? So there we have it. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to add my faux stitching. I don't need any glue. I don't need to poke any holes because my heart is styrofoam. If this wasn't styrofoam, let's say you were using plastic heart, you're going to need to go in with a pick or drill holes or something. If it's paper mache, I would also suggest paper mache going in and pre-piercing your holes just with a tiny craft pick. The thing I like about a craft pick, let me just explain this one to you. This is mine from Tonic. Different than a die pick that I showed last week. This craft pick is retractable. It's got a little spring-loaded button, and each time you push it, it extends the needle, right? But if you notice the diameter of the needle, it starts out very small. So if you only do one click, it's going to pierce a small hole. Another click, it pierces it slightly larger. And as you extend it further, it becomes wider. So this is what's going to determine whether you make a giant hole, or in this case, I would just probably go to like long enough that it can reach past the arrow, probably like that. And it's just going to allow me to go in and go poke, 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 and just poke the holes in that paper mache. But because it's styrofoam, like I said, we don't need to do that. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to take the tack, we're going to take it, and we're going to basically kind of go right over the top of that arrow, just at an angle, right into that styrofoam, and I'm just going to press it. Stitch 1, done. Easy steampunk sewing 101 with Tim Holtz.
Stitch 1 done?
Yes, stitch 1 done. I'm going to crisscross that, push that down. There's my little X. Stitch 2, done. So I said steampunk stitching with Tim. So I do the center one first, it's just easier for me because I like them to be a bit wonky. Again, this is probably something I would do closer to my face, but I'm trying to do this on camera so you can see. Pressing that down into the styrofoam. There's my other little stitch. And then I just go at another angle, press that down, push. There's my other stitch. Look at that. See, it's the perfect gauge wire for that. I'm going to do another one. I'm going to go a little one right here, right above that end of that. Perfect. Press down and make a little X and press down. See, no glue, no nothing. Done. Little simple. And could you add like more? You can go, just go crazy. You can add as many stitches as you want. I mean, I think it's really a very cool way to add a stitch. Heck, I'm going to, because I can. And they're just sitting there. They're already bent. They're calling me. They're like, please use them. So this one was going to get 4 stitches. All right. crisscross that. Love it. Look at that detail. Isn't that cool? It just adds a very finished effect that when you gave to someone, you'd be like, what? You stitched through that? Yes, I did. And I hand forged that metal. Yeah, I know that Wanda could do that. She'd take her little arc welder and should be cooking this thing up, wouldn't you, Wanda? So there you go. That is the back. So now we're ready. Frame is still drying. This is done. Now we're ready to deal with this. Now, people do different things. I mean, I've seen makers make a little paper box or a sleeve or cover it with washi tape. You can do whatever you want with the cord, but nevertheless, you're going to have some sort of cord with your lights. Okay, there you go. You can admire the stitch beauty. We'll see that in a second. Okay, let's see. Do our lights still work? Oh, thank goodness. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this, and I just like to wrap this, and I'm going to attach it to the back of the box. So I need to just move these rubber bands down or out of the way completely if you want. Now, as I mentioned, these are replaceable batteries. So there's going to be one side that's going to have this little door that lifts up. See that little door right there? I don't want to open it because I don't want the batteries to fall out, but there you go. There's your little door. So I want to make sure that the door side is up. So I'm going to apply adhesive to the back. And you can always remember that the door has that copper bar that runs vertical versus these little pieces, right? So that's always the front. So I'm going to place my adhesive. I'm going to go back and just, now I've got more of that red line tape. Again, could you glue this? Yes, you could do all those, go through all those adhesive things. But for this one, I'm just going to have a little piece of that tape. The Tonic scissors are non-stick, so it is nice that you're able to just do that. I'll place that right along the back. Okay, this way it's ready to go. And now I need to do my cable. So I just like to wrap this cord, just kind of like that, just in a little circle. Can you guys see that? I can't really pick this up. And then I'm just going to squeeze that little wire together. I've talked about these before too. I think even Vicky Booten got them. I just got these little black twist ties from Amazon. They're just coated wire, but you could use a cable tie, you could use tape, you could do whatever. But I like the fact that these little twist ties are super convenient for not only, well, mostly for cords or string or anything. And because they're flat, it's going to allow me to just hold that together and just wrap this around with this wire, right? I can slide that up. I can squeeze it together with my fingers. Just gives it a nice little, see, it's just a little wrap. And it just sits there. So now I can peel off the back. Let's see if my fingers work. Ooh, look at that. Lucky on that. And then I can just position this, stick this down, right? Make sure that's nice and secure. Could you glue this? Yes, but you can see by kind of keeping it together, you don't necessarily need to do that. Should be able to just remove these. And, oh, now my battery, now because I did that, my lights don't work. Leave it up to me, Mario. Jeez. Isn't that just how it always is? Good gravy. Hold on, let me just get my connection. Just gonna pull these up. There we go. Because see, when you push down too hard on the contacts, if you flatten them, it doesn't make contact with the battery. I'll just show you what you can always check, right? So see that little coppery thing right here? If you push down like I did, you flatten that little dip so it doesn't touch the battery. Just going in, like, give them a gentle bend back out so it makes contact. And there we go. So there is our little box. Pretty simple, right? So